My son-in-law poisoned my wife for money. He didn't know I was a prosecutor. I used to believe justice belonged in the courtroom. Then it invaded my living room. That Sunday, I'd driven to my daughter's house unannounced, pie in hand, ready to surprise them for lunch. The neighbor shouted from across the street, "Wait!" But by the time I reached the porch, I heard my wife screaming inside. Minutes later, paramedics carried her out, eyes glassy, lips blue. My son-in-law, Brian, stood there trembling or pretending to. "Dad," he stammered, "she must have taken the wrong medicine." I looked at the coffee cup on the counter. "You poured it, didn't you? Why would I hurt her?" "For money," I said quietly. "The insurance you just updated last month." He froze. My daughter sobbed. "You think I don't know how to read a motive?" I stepped closer. "You married into a prosecutor's family, son. You poisoned the wrong woman. I guess 99% of you will hear this, sigh and scroll past, not clicking like or subscribe, even if it only takes a second. What time is it for you, and where are you listening? 40 years in prosecution teaches you that peace isn't a gift, it's a verdict you earn. Mine came quietly, without applause, when I finally locked my office door for the last time and walked away from the courthouse. Linda waited outside that day, her hand light on my arm, her eyes saying everything words would only cheapen. We'd made it. We had survived the years of midnight calls, broken families, and courtroom lies. We'd earned this calm. Our home sat on a small bluff over the Pacific, 2 bedrooms, pale stone floors, a view that looked painted even on bad days. Mornings began the same. I brewed coffee while Linda opened the windows, letting salt air roll through. The smell of ocean mixed with polish and order. The marble under my feet reflected the light like a mirror, every tile placed by a craftsman I'd paid extra to do it right. I liked things done right. After breakfast, Linda left for a short visit with our daughter Jessica, promising she'd be back before dinner. I watched her drive off, then rinsed our coffee cups and returned them to their exact places in the cabinet. It sounds obsessive, I know. But when you've spent a lifetime parsing evidence and timelines, even domestic order feels like justice. My next ritual was the filing cabinet. Walnut finish, 3 drawers, each one labeled. The top held current bills and maintenance receipts. The middle investments, tax returns, certificates of deposit. But the bottom drawer, that one carried the weight of a life. Inside were the papers that truly mattered. Our estate plan, the trust documents, Linda's health proxy, my old prosecutor's ID, and tucked in a clear sleeve, Emily's last drawing. Our little girl, gone before she reached 9, had once scribbled us holding hands beneath a crooked sundae. Linda still touched that paper like it was warm. I kept it next to the insurance folder because, in my mind, protection took many forms. I updated the estate binder that morning, labeling everything in crisp black ink. Organization was a comfort, a way of saying to the universe, "You may take what you want, but you won't take me by surprise." When I was done, I poured a small measure of bourbon into a crystal glass, held it up to the window, and watched sunlight fracture through it like amber glass. Robert, my neighbor, waved from across the hedges, retired Navy. 2 years my senior, the sort of man who still mowed his lawn in perfect stripes. Reliable. He once joked that I made my house look like a crime scene. No prints, no mess. We laughed. The afternoon slid by in silence, broken only by the rhythmic creak of the porch swing and the gulls arguing over scraps. Peace isn't exciting. It's deliberate. It's earned through years of noise until the quiet feels like grace. I told myself I'd finally learned how to be still. Yet even in that stillness, something small stirred a faint ripple of unease that I couldn't name. Maybe it was memory, or maybe the way the wind rattled the screen door like a whisper. I thought of Brian, our son-in-law, who once joked after a family barbecue, "You won't even notice if we crash for a bit, Dad. You've got space." Everyone laughed then, even me. But the way he said space like it was his for the taking lingered longer than I liked. I brushed it off. People say worse when the beer's cold and the company forgiving. Still, as the sun dropped, I checked the cabinet once more before locking it. My fingertips rested on Emily's drawing. The colors had faded, but the crayon lines held strong. Peace takes decades to build, and a single careless footstep to disturb. I locked the drawer, thinking peace could be kept by habit alone. Then my phone lit up Brian's name. The phone rang just as I was rinsing the bourbon glass. Brian's name glowed on the screen, odd for a weekday afternoon. He rarely called me unless he needed something. "Hey, Dad," he began, that slick tone he used when he was about to cross a line but wanted you to feel flattered about it. "You home?" I hesitated before answering. "I am. Why?" A soft chuckle came through, the kind that pretends to be shy but isn't. Jessica was just saying how Emily's birthday's coming up. We thought maybe it'd be nice to do something small. Family, a few friends. She misses your cooking. The name hit like a pebble dropped into deep water. Emily, our daughter. Gone 20 years now. Yet somehow Brian managed to say her name like a tool. "I thought we agreed we'd keep it quiet this year," I said carefully. "Oh, come on, Dad," he said, stretching the word until it sounded like a plea. "Emily would want us all together tonight. Just a few friends. We'll keep it respectful." That line, "Emily would want us all together," was surgical. It reached straight into the guilt every parent carries and twisted it. He knew what he was doing. I could hear the faint laughter of other voices in the background. Music. Ice clinking in glasses. It wasn't mourning he was planning. It was something else. "Brian," I said slowly, "tonight's short notice. Linda's not back yet." He didn't pause. "Oh, she's here. We were chatting earlier. She said you'd probably come by once you heard. She's helping Jessica prep some appetizers. You've got the best timing, honestly." I felt the first sting of unease. My wife was already there, folded into whatever plan he'd spun. He softened his voice, almost a whisper. "It's for family, Dad. Don't make it complicated." There it was, the manipulation dressed as affection. "Don't make it complicated." Translation: "Don't make me look bad." I glanced toward the filing cabinet in the corner, that silent symbol of control and preparation. My hand brushed the drawer, grounding myself in order, but my pulse ticked higher. He said "Dad" again twice in the same sentence, and something old flickered in me. I remembered last Christmas standing in his driveway with a cashier's check for $30,000. "Just a rough patch," he'd said then, shame plastered behind a smile. "Gambling debt. I'd paid it because Jessica cried, because family mattered, because forgiveness seemed easier than confrontation. And here he was, spending it like memory meant immunity. "I'll see what I can do," I finally said, keeping my voice even. "Send me the address." "Oh, don't worry," he said brightly. "Same house, same love, same family. You'll see it'll be good for everyone." I smiled into the silence, a prosecutor's smile, the one that looked friendly while already taking notes. "Sure, Brian, I'll bring something." As he launched into small talk about traffic and playlists, I reached for my phone and tapped the small red button. Old habit. One-party consent in this state, and I'd memorized the statutes before he'd ever learned to fake sincerity. His voice kept pouring through the speaker, warm and oily, sealing his own record of intent. "I'll grab one of those pies from Linda's favorite bakery," I said, letting him think I was swept up in his warmth. "Perfect. Bring your appetite," he laughed. "We'll toast to family." When the call ended, I stood there a moment longer, phone still recording the silence. My reflection in the glass door looked calm, but my stomach tightened. Linda texted a heart emoji, and a simple message. "Let's be kind." I slipped the phone into my pocket, grabbed my keys, and walked to the car. The evening light caught on the edge of the filing cabinet, the metal gleaming like an unspoken warning. If I said no, I'd be the cold one who forgot my own child. So I said yes. He called me Dad again, and the word felt like a bill coming due. When I pulled into Jessica's driveway, I told myself to breathe. It wasn't anger yet, just a low hum of something I didn't want to name. The porch lights were already on, and laughter spilled through the front door before I'd even stepped out of the car. Inside, I expected quiet conversation, maybe wine and gentle music. Instead, the air was thick with perfume, beer, and too many voices speaking over one another. 6 strangers I'd never seen before filled the living room, red cups in hand, leaning against furniture that didn't belong to them. Jessica rushed over, her cheeks flushed. "Dad, you made it," she said, hugging me like a guilty child trying to distract a teacher from the open test answers. "Brian said a few friends," I said, scanning the crowd. "Oh, these are just a few," she replied quickly, her laugh too light. "You remember Rachel from yoga? And these are Brian's co-workers. They were nearby, so..." Before I could finish the sentence forming in my head, the front door opened again. 2 more people entered, dragging the night air and loud chatter in with them. We're already on the way, Jessica said. It's chill, one of them shouted, waving as if we'd met before. Jessica winced. I might have mentioned it in the group chat, she whispered. Group chat. I could almost hear the prosecutorial voice in my head, reading the indictment. Defendant knowingly expanded few friends to an entire guest list. Linda appeared from the kitchen, smiling her soft, peacemaking smile. We have enough for everyone, she said, setting down a platter of cheese and crackers. Her voice trembled at the edges, just enough for me to catch it. Looks great, Mom, Brian said, wrapping his arm around her. He didn't see the exhaustion in her shoulders. Or maybe he did and didn't care. The evening unfolded like a slow leak in a perfect pipe. No explosion, just steady damage. Coats and handbags piled onto Linda's favorite chair. Someone balanced a half-empty beer can on the counter where she kept her flower vase. Another guest dragged in a cooler, the sound of it scraping against the marble cutting into my patience like a dull blade. I caught Brian filming, panning across the room with his phone. Family night, he announced, voice loud and performative. Best in-laws ever. The group cheered. My name was tagged before I could even turn away. I moved through the house like a janitor of my own, straightening cushions, closing cabinet doors, wiping condensation rings from the counter. Each motion small, precise, contained. Old instincts from the courtroom. Control the scene, read the chaos, wait for the slip. Linda brushed past me. It's fine, she whispered. They'll be gone soon. Oh, but soon stretched into later, and later felt like a lie that had grown legs. Someone opened the fridge without asking, pulling out the last of Linda's sparkling cider. Another person laughed too loud, the sound bouncing off the glass walls until it didn't feel like home anymore. I stood near the entryway, hands in my pockets, letting my gaze drop to the floor. That's when I saw it, a faint streak of dirt on the marble, traced in from someone's shoe. Just one at first near the door. It broke the reflection of the overhead light, a crooked smudge against perfection. I reached for a rag, but I didn't clean it. I stared at it, because I knew what it meant. Footprints never stop at one. Brian clapped me on the shoulder, oblivious. Dad, you've got to loosen up. Life's short, right? I smiled thinly, the same smile I used on witnesses who thought charm was armor. Short, I said, but consequences are long. He laughed, not hearing the weight behind the words. When I finally stepped outside for air, the laughter still rolled through the walls, muffled but relentless. The house glowed with light, my wife's kindness hosting the uninvited. Inside, the dirt on the marble waited for company. By the second hour, the laughter had deepened into something looser, louder, the kind of noise that didn't recognize walls or courtesy. I told myself it was temporary, that by morning the house would be quiet again, back to the rhythm Linda and I had built. But peace is like glass. Once it's cracked, every sound finds the fracture. I started noticing small things first. The fridge door hanging open, cold air pooling out like a sigh. The labeled leftovers Linda's handwriting on neat white tape were gone. Even the slice of apple pie I'd planned to eat later had vanished, the foil folded carelessly and left behind. I closed the fridge and checked the thermostat. Someone had cranked the temperature down to 68. The system wheezed, trying to correct someone else's comfort. The patio door stood ajar, letting in the night air and the faint crash of the Pacific. It should have been a beautiful sound, but mixed with the bass thumping from Brian's portable speaker, it felt invasive, like the ocean itself had been dragged into the living room and told to dance. I turned off the patio light, half hoping they'd take the hint. They didn't. A pair of sneakers scuffed across the marble white soles, streaking gray across the floor. I polished every Sunday. I heard Brian's voice behind me. Relax, Dad, it's just a floor. Oh? He said it with that easy grin people wear when they know you won't challenge them. The grin that assumes forgiveness is free and endless. I crouched, wiped the mark with a cloth, and felt the quiet flicker of something I hadn't felt in years, the instinct to document. In prosecution, you learn that small things are never small. They're tells. Evidence of a mind that thinks the rules bend around it. I opened the Notes app on my phone. 8:47 p.m. Scuffed floor. Fridge open. Food missing. A ridiculous thing to write, maybe. But I needed the record for myself more than anyone. Linda moved among the guests with plates of cheese and crackers, smiling like she could will order back into existence. I caught her eye once. She gave me the smallest shake of her head. Don't. Not tonight. I obeyed for now. From the corner of the room, Brian propped his phone on the counter, filming some kind of family gathering segment for his followers. Best in-laws in the world, he said into the camera, raising a beer. They don't judge, they just vibe. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from speaking. Behind him, the mess accumulated bottles sweating on wood, crumbs where they shouldn't be, voices echoing through rooms that used to hold quiet conversations, and the smell of cinnamon candles. When the crowd drifted toward the patio, I followed. The air outside was cooler, fresher, but littered now with bottle caps and a half-eaten slice of pizza on the railing. The ocean breeze tried to cleanse it. The beer smell fought back. I looked down at my shoes, polished leather reflecting the mess, and knew something was shifting. This wasn't hospitality anymore. It was invasion by familiarity, the kind that starts with a just this once and ends with ownership. I took photos in silence. Just the mess, the shoes, the open door, the small physical proofs of disrespect. Brian laughed behind me, oblivious, showing someone a new phone filter that made his eyes shimmer blue. He had that swagger people mistake for confidence, but which I recognized for what it was, entitlement dressed as charm. When Linda finally began ushering people toward their coats, the house looked like it had exhaled too much life. I closed the patio door, latched it twice, and checked the lock. It clicked, firm and certain. That's when I saw it Jessica's tote bag slumped near the entryway. A silver ring light poked out, gleaming in the dim light. She'd brought her studio. Not for family memories, for content. I stood there for a long moment, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence left by their laughter. My hand rested on the counter, steadying myself against the anger that wanted out. Order is a promise. Breaking it is a tell. When people show you their respect in crumbs, they plan to eat the loaf. The next morning, Jessica would ask if they could crash just tonight. By morning, I'd convinced myself the chaos of the night before had been a one-off, an accident of youth and bad manners. But when Jessica and Brian arrived again that afternoon, still glowing from last night's laughter, I knew better. Jessica breezed in first, her phone already raised like a shield. "Dad, can we stay just tonight?" she asked, glancing around the living room as if she were scouting a film location instead of her parents' home. "The light here is perfect. It helps my brand. If the vibe looks luxe, your place is perfect." I stared at her for a long second, the word brand catching like a splinter. "You have your own house, Jessica," I said quietly. "I know, but it's just cluttered right now," she said with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "We'll be gone by morning." Behind her, Brian smiled like a salesman closing a deal. "We'll clean up, Dad. Promise. You won't even know we were here." He said it the same way he'd said, "I'll pay you back 2 years ago," after the down payment fiasco. I saw it as clear as the reflection in the window, him sitting across from me at the kitchen table, palms up, sheepish grin. Jessica silent beside him, eyes glassy with embarrassment. "We just need a little help to get started," he'd said. And I'd written the check. Because that's what parents do. Because I believed stability would fix them. But stability had only made them comfortable. Linda emerged from the kitchen, her apron dusted with flour. "You can stay," she said gently. "But just the couch tonight, okay? Dad and I have an early morning." Jessica groaned, but covered it with a laugh. "Of course, Mom. You're the best." I added, "Off by 10. Brian raised both hands. "Totally fair, Dad, totally." He turned to Jessica. "See? Easy. Easy." That word again. They began rearranging the living room like it was a set. Pillows fluffed, candles lit, curtains pulled wide for natural light. Jessica's phone stayed in her hand, recording snippets of everything. Her voice rose and fell in the performative tone of someone narrating a life she wished she had. "Guys, this place is a vibe," she said into the camera, panning across my shelves. Linda smiled politely, retreating into the kitchen where she could pretend not to hear it. I stood by the fireplace, watching, cataloging. Their movements were small but cumulative. The open drawers, the borrowed charger, the half-finished drinks left sweating on the counter. I'd seen this kind of erosion before, in depositions and family disputes. It never began with theft. It began with permission. When I reminded them of the 10 o'clock limit, Brian flashed his easy grin again. "Absolutely, we're adults, not teenagers." I didn't answer. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, I heard the faint shudder of Jessica's phone camera again and again, capturing angles of her life that didn't belong to her. I told myself not to care that walls and floors couldn't be insulted, but I felt it anyway. That quiet insult of being tolerated in your own home. By 9:30, the house smelled of their cologne, their takeout, their noise. I began collecting the empty cans without a word. Jessica offered a lazy, "Thanks, Dad," while Brian scrolled through his phone. Their voices softened to murmurs, giggles shared between people who believed they'd gotten away with something. I turned off the television. It had been background noise for their chatter, and caught a glimpse of their reflection in the black screen, the smirk on Brian's face. Jessica leaning in close, whispering something that made him laugh. They didn't see me watching. In the reflection, I saw the pattern as clearly as I'd seen any case file. Manipulation disguised as affection, entitlement cloaked in laughter. Kindness, without edges, is a doormat with a welcome sign. I turned off the lights, letting the darkness reclaim the house. 10 o'clock, I said, my voice even. Good night. Sure thing, Dad, Brian said, still smiling. But I could hear him already texting someone as I walked down the hall. Predators test fences with their teeth before they charge. And from the faint buzz of his phone, I knew he'd just found the next fence to bite. The next evening began too quiet. That kind of silence that hums before a storm. Linda had gone to bed early, worn down by hosting, and by the weight of pretending everything was fine. I sat in my leather chair with a book I didn't read, waiting for the inevitable sound. It came around 8. Laughter. The front door clicked open without a knock. Brian's voice, low and conspiratorial. "Yeah, come by. He won't mind, we're family." The words carried just far enough for me to hear them from the hallway. He won't mind. My name reduced to a permission slip. I stayed seated for a moment, counting heartbeats. Then I picked up my phone, pressed record, and set it face down on the console table by the hall. Old instincts document before you confront. Through the open doorway, I caught glimpses. Brian leaning against the counter, phone on speaker. The tinny echo of a man's voice on the other end. "You sure it's cool?" Brian chuckled. "Please, he's retired. Just a chill hangout. Place looks like a magazine good backdrop for a few photos." He didn't lower his voice, didn't hide. The arrogance of assuming tolerance equals consent. I typed a message to Linda. "We'll wind this down soon." She replied with a single heart emoji. I could picture her face, eyes half shut, trusting me to handle it. That trust tightened something in me. The screen on Brian's phone lit up, a cascade of notifications, laughing emojis, thumbs up, a single text that read, "Send address." I watched as he typed our address into the group chat. The casualness of it hit harder than any argument could. To him, my home wasn't sacred. It was scenery, a prop. I slipped into the kitchen quietly, refilled my water, and noted the time, 8:27 p.m. I'd trained myself to think in timestamps, to catalog behavior like evidence. Each sound a data point, each trespass a pattern. 8:29, speakerphone conversation, third party invited. 8:31, message sent with home address. Brian noticed me watching from the doorway and flashed his disarming grin. "Hey, Dad, sorry, hope that's okay. Couple buddies from the gym might swing by. Just an hour or two." I smiled back, polite but measured. "Sure," I said. "Just remember what we agreed on. Keep it small." And nodded too quickly. "Absolutely, small." I took a sip of water and turned away, hearing his whisper trail behind me. "He's cool. Just stay low-key." Outside, through the front window, I saw the neighbor's porch light flick on. Robert. He stood there for a moment, arms crossed, gaze drifting toward the cars already idling near my curb. I gave him a small wave, pretending everything was normal. He didn't wave back. He just nodded once, a kind of quiet acknowledgement. Back in the living room, Brian's laughter filled the space again, louder this time. I noticed the sound of chairs scraping, more people arriving, and the clinking of bottles. My phone kept recording in the hallway, just ambient noise, nothing dramatic yet, but enough to prove escalation. I took another note. 8:52. Additional vehicles present, at least 3 new voices. I glanced outside once more. 2 cars I didn't recognize. License plates reflected under the streetlight Ohio plates, not local. I jotted them down on a scrap of paper and slipped it into the inside pocket of my jacket. There's something both numbing and sharpening about betrayal when it's happening in real time. I didn't feel anger, not yet. Just clarity. Every word, every laugh, every careless gesture they were writing their own case file. Then came the ping. Loud, clear, unmistakable from Brian's phone. He didn't even look ashamed as he glanced at the screen. Group chat message. Address? And beneath it his reply. Here you go. Followed by our full home address, street and all. He looked up at me, half smile still painted on. You okay with a few more, Dad? It's Friday after all. I met his eyes and said nothing. Just picked up my phone from the hallway table, stopped the recording, and checked the file length. 10 minutes. 23 seconds. Plenty. Open invitations are for public places. This house is not public. Outside, I could already see headlights stacking along the curb, laughter carrying across the lawn. By 9 o'clock, the quiet rhythm of our neighborhood had been replaced by the dull, repetitive bass of a portable speaker. Headlights stacked along the curb, one after another, until my driveway looked like an overflow lot for people who didn't live here. The front door was wide open. The cold ocean air mixed with the heavy smell of beer and cologne clashing like two incompatible truths. Inside, people I'd never met helped themselves to the fridge, the couches, the view. Dude, this view is content gold. Where's the good liquor? Someone yelled, stepping onto the patio like he owned it. I didn't answer. I just stood in the doorway and watched. 15, maybe more. Most of them young, loud, entitled. They laughed with the kind of carelessness that comes from never having paid for anything they broke. Wet footprints trailed across the marble like a map of disrespect. Beer bottle rings on the counter, salsa splattered near the sink. The smell of cheap tortilla chips, perfume, and salt air mingled into something rancid. Brian spotted me from across the room and lifted his phone in a mock toast. Dad, come join us, family night's blowing up. He said it like a punchline, but I saw what it really was. A live stream. His phone faced the crowd, red recording light blinking, capturing laughter, clinking bottles, and the glow of my home behind him. I could already imagine the caption chill vibes with the fam. He'd turned my house into a backdrop, my family's history into content. I moved through the room carefully, not to join them, but to protect what mattered. Someone leaned against the mantel, one hand dangerously close to the framed photo of Emily. I stepped in, took it quietly, and set it back on the shelf across the room, out of reach. No one noticed. They were too busy talking over each other, performing for an invisible audience that lived behind their screens. Linda peeked from the hallway, her expression soft but strained. I shook my head gently. She understood. Words would only feed them. I opened my phone instead, the notes app still running from the night before. New. Duts. Uninvited guests entering. Approx. Keynes Total. 9:15. Live stream in progress. 9:17. Property damage. Marble scuffed. Furniture moved. I took photos discreetly, footprints on the floor. Beer cans beside my reading chair. Condensation dripping from a ring on the mahogany table. I didn't tidy this time. I documented. Every instinct from my years in court returned, cool and exacting. I remembered cases where victims ruined their credibility by reacting too soon. Rage never wins on record. Only evidence does. So I let the chaos unfold. Someone turned up the music. Another opened the patio door wider, letting the night spill inside. I could hear the waves crashing faintly against the cliffs below, a sound I used to find peaceful. Now it only felt mocking. Jessica drifted through the crowd, glowing in the ring light she'd set up earlier. She twirled, laughed, and narrated her own little broadcast. Guys, check this out, family vibes. #blessed. When she caught my gaze, she looked away, embarrassed for a split second, then kept recording. By 10, the place was unrecognizable. The marble glistened under a film of spilled drink. The air was heavy, sticky. Someone started singing off-key. Another knocked over a lamp. I just wrote 10-4. Lamp down. Guests still arriving. Through it all, I stayed calm. My pulse slowed, my breath even. A strange peace settled over me, not acceptance, but focus. If I blew now, they'd call me bitter, controlling. The old man who couldn't handle noise. But if I built the case, quietly, piece by piece, They'd hang themselves with their own rope. Then I saw it, the thing that broke the last thin thread of calm. On Brian's live stream, behind his grinning face, the camera panned past the hallway. The master bedroom door, our sanctuary, was cracked open. I froze, watching that small, intimate space appear for strangers to gawk at. That room was never for show. There's one room I do not bargain about. The master bedroom was never meant to be seen by anyone outside this family. It was the last quiet place we kept sacred: Linda's prayer candle on the dresser, Emily's music box on the nightstand, the framed photo of the three of us smiling in a park that doesn't even exist anymore. That room held the sound of a life well lived, and the silence of everything we'd lost. I was halfway down the hall when I heard Jessica's voice. Bright, carefree, amplified through her phone. "Guys, come on, Master Suite Tour. Say hi to the internet from the love room." Laughter followed, the kind that burns your ears when you know it's wrong. I stepped into the doorway just as she pushed inside. Phone raised high, red recording light blinking. The crowd behind her cheered. She panned across our bedspread, our dresser, the framed photo, Emily's photo, and her tone shifted from playful to mocking. "Ah, whose photo is this, Grandpa?" The word hit harder than the intrusion. Grandpa? Like I was some quaint relic living in a museum she owned. Her fingertips brushed the frame. It tilted, fell onto the comforter with a dull thud. A ripple of giggles filled the room. I felt the burn rise from my chest to my throat. My hand tightened around the doorframe so hard my knuckles ached. Rage boiled, pure and heavy, but I smiled anyway. Justice needs a steady hand. I stepped forward into the frame of her live stream. The laughter quieted. Jessica froze, eyes wide, phone trembling. "End it," I said softly. "Dad, it's just—" "End it." She hesitated. Then, like a child caught stealing, she tapped the screen. The red light disappeared. I reached out, not for her, but for the photo. I set it upright again, smoothing the wrinkled fabric beneath it. I took out my phone, photographed the screen of hers before she could tuck it away, the app open, her handle visible, the timestamp glowing in the corner. Then I looked up. The room behind her was full of strangers, some half laughing, some uneasy, all realizing, perhaps for the first time, that they were somewhere they shouldn't be. I said nothing. I just walked past them, down the hall to my study, and closed the door. The click of the lock sounded louder than the music still playing from the other room. I sat at my desk, opened the folder of notes I'd been building, timestamps, photos, license plates, everything. My fingers trembled, but not from fear, from certainty. I pressed record on the voice memo app, documenting my statement. "This is Richard Callahan. I am in my residence. Multiple individuals have entered without consent. Trespass is active and ongoing." Then I picked up the phone, dialed 911, and spoke the words that ended the charade. "I'm reporting an active trespass in my residence." The dispatcher asked for details. I gave them calmly, clearly, the way I'd trained witnesses to do for decades. "Yes, ma'am. They were invited by my son-in-law initially for a family gathering, but additional people entered without permission. There's property damage, disorderly conduct, and live streaming of private areas. I'd like officers dispatched immediately." I hung up and exhaled. Outside the closed door, the party still churned music, laughter, the clink of bottles. None of them knew yet that the night had changed. Justice doesn't need anger. It just needs timing. When a boundary is mocked, the law answers. Through the window, faint but approaching, I heard the echo of sirens slicing through the coastal night. In the living room, Brian's voice rose over the others, smooth, performative, already rehearsing. "Everybody chill. I got this. My father-in-law just gets overwhelmed sometimes." He was preparing his role, but I was done playing mine. The blue and red lights painted the marble floor like a confession. Outside, the wail of sirens faded to a hum as two officers stepped through the open doorway, boots leaving clean, wet marks over the ones already tracked in by my uninvited guests. Brian was the first to meet them, his tone honeyed, hands raised in mock reassurance. "Hey, officers. Big misunderstanding here. My father-in-law's just stressed out. We were celebrating family night, and I guess it got a little loud." The word stressed hit me like a practiced lie. I'd heard that same tone in 100 courtrooms defendants who thought charm could outshine truth. I stood near the hallway, arms crossed, silent. Linda hovered behind me, pale, unsure whether to speak. The officers glanced between us, already mapping out who looked more reasonable. Brian's easy grin, Jessica's tearful apology they were performing well. "Sir," one of the officers said, addressing me, "are you the homeowner?" "Yes," I said, voice steady. "Richard Callahan." I handed over my ID before he could ask. And yes, I made the call. Brian stepped in, shaking his head like a disappointed son. "Dad, you must be confused. This is your own family." I turned to him, and for the first time in years, let silence become the weapon. He filled it quickly, words tumbling out. "We didn't mean any harm. It's just that Mom said it was fine." "Mom didn't say anything," I interrupted. My tone was flat. "And you invited 15 strangers into my home without consent. That's called trespassing, Brian." The officer held up a hand. "Let's keep this calm, Mr. Callahan. Can you tell me what happened?" I nodded once. "Of course." I reached for the folder on my desk, the one I'd been building quietly for nights. Printed screenshots, time-stamped photos, even a transcript of the recorded call from earlier in the week. I placed them neatly on the counter, one page at a time. "Here are the details, and this," I handed over my phone, "is an audio recording of the initial invitation. You'll hear him admit he planned this as a party, not a family visit." The officer pressed play. Brian's own voice filled the air. "He won't mind we're family," then laughter. "It's perfect for a few pics." "Oh." The sound of his own words bounced off the walls that had once echoed with Emily's laughter. The second officer looked up slowly. "Sir," he said to Brian, "I think we've heard enough." Brian's smile faltered, then reassembled itself with shaky sincerity. "Come on, guys, this is crazy. You really gonna kick me out of my in-laws' house? He's overreacting. I was just—" "Sir," the officer repeated, firmer this time, "you're leaving tonight." Jessica gasped. "You can't do that." Yes, we can," the officer said, his tone clipped. "Private property. Homeowner complaint. Documented evidence. You're leaving now, or we escort you out." For the first time that evening, the music stopped. The guests shuffled, unsure what to do without a cue from their host. One by one, they filed toward the door, muttering apologies that meant nothing. Brian stood frozen, the mask of casual charm cracking. "Dad," he said finally, the words sour now, stripped of warmth. "You really called the cops on your own daughter's husband?" "No," I said quietly. "I called the cops on a man who forgot what family means." He stared at me a moment longer, then turned, shoving past the officers. Outside, the headlights of his car flared against the driveway. I closed the door slowly behind him. The echo of it felt like a gavel. Linda exhaled for the first time in hours, her hand trembling against the doorframe. I took her hand and guided her to the kitchen. Neither of us spoke. On the counter, her coffee cup from earlier sat untouched, the surface gone cold. She lifted it absently, took a sip, and grimaced. "Tastes bitter," she whispered. I looked toward the hallway, the trail of footprints, the upturned photo, the silence that followed their exit. "They left that night," I said, more to myself than to her. But I knew snakes shed skins, not souls. Outside, Brian's car engine revved hard, tearing into the night. Inside, the house stood still again, but the peace had changed shape. For a few days after the police escort, the house exhaled. The silence wasn't peace exactly, but it was order, the kind that comes after a storm when everything broken lies where you can see it. I scrubbed the marble floors myself, one square at a time, until the faint outlines of their footprints disappeared. Then the phone started ringing. "Richard," my sister-in-law began, her voice loaded with sympathy that didn't belong to me. "Brian says you're under a lot of stress since retiring. Maybe you just need to rest?" I didn't answer. She filled the silence. "He told everyone you called the police on a family dinner. People are worried." I thanked her for the concern, hung up, and sat at the kitchen table staring at the phone. The same marble I'd cleaned that morning now reflected my own disbelief back at me. Within hours, the calls multiplied: cousins, old colleagues, even a neighbor who'd heard about an incident. Every story slightly warped, every detail tilted just enough to make me sound fragile. By nightfall, I saw the first post. Brian's profile picture beamed in perfect sincerity, hand over heart beside a caption, "Please keep my father-in-law in your thoughts. Retirement's been hard on him. We're just worried. Family means standing by each other, even when it's uncomfortable. Um, a photo followed, one from last Christmas. Me smiling stiffly, him grinning beside me, arm draped over my shoulder like affection was ownership. The comments came fast. You're such a good son. He's lucky to have you. Hope he gets the help he needs. The bile rose before the rage. He wasn't just rewriting the story, he was prosecuting me in the court of public opinion. Linda scrolled through her phone at the counter, brow furrowed. Richard, she said quietly, maybe he's just embarrassed. He's young, impulsive. Don't let it get to you. Embarrassed people apologize, I said. Liars perform. She gave me a look that was more tired than angry. I just want peace. Peace. The same word I'd once believed in. That evening I took screenshots of every post, every comment, every message forwarded from relatives who didn't want to take sides. I stored them in a new folder beside my audio files and photos from the party. Evidence wasn't just for courtrooms anymore, it was for survival. But what I couldn't capture was the slow shift in my own home. Linda's voice softened whenever she mentioned Brian. She'd always been the bridge, but now she was torn plank by plank. I noticed the way her hands trembled when she poured tea. At first I thought it was anger, or maybe fear. One afternoon Robert, my neighbor, met me by the mailbox. He hesitated before speaking. Saw something odd online, Rich? Some awareness post about elder vulnerability. Your name's not in it, but he didn't finish. He didn't need to. I'd seen that tactic before false concern as a prelude to character assassination. I walked back inside and found Linda sitting at the kitchen island, teacup trembling against the saucer. Did you eat today? I asked. I'm fine, she said, forcing a smile. Just tired. But her face had lost its color. Her eyes seemed far away, like she was listening to two voices at once, mine and the echo of his. That night, as I reviewed the saved screenshots, the clink of her cup startled me. It slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor, the tea spreading like a bruise across the tile. Linda? She didn't answer. Her body slumped forward, the porcelain shards glinting under the kitchen light. I caught her before she hit the ground, my hands shaking as I called 911 for the second time in a week, this time not for trespass, but for the woman I'd spent my life protecting. As the siren wailed in the distance, I stared at the teacup fragments glistening on the floor. Poison isn't always chemical at first, it's the drip of doubt. Hospitals have a smell that never leaves you, antiseptic and grief, mixed with recycled air. I'd spent decades walking those corridors as a prosecutor, visiting victims, witnesses, and the accused. But that night, standing under the harsh fluorescent light outside Linda's room, it felt different. The hum of machines, the rhythm of her heartbeat on the monitor, it all sounded like a countdown I couldn't control. A doctor approached, clipboard in hand. His expression was professional but uneasy. Mr. Callahan, he said, voice low, your wife's labs show traces of a foreign compound. We're still confirming, but it looks like ethylene glycol antifreeze. The words hit like a blunt instrument. My first thought wasn't horror, it was recognition. I'd seen this toxin before, used in cases where intent wore a domestic face. It was sweet to taste, deadly in silence. Before I could respond, Brian appeared behind me, voice soft, just loud enough for the doctor to hear. Dad, he said, laying a hand on my shoulder. Come on, she must have taken her meds wrong. You know how she gets when she's tired. The gall of it. He leaned closer, his tone dipped into something rehearsed. You can't jump to conclusions, the police already think you're tense. Let's not make this worse. I turned my head slowly, studying him the way I used to study defendants on the stand. No eye twitch, no shake in his hands, just that smirk that pretended to be concern. Linda's voice, faint and fading, drifted from the room. Richard. I stepped inside briefly, held her hand, cold and limp. The IV line snaked into her arm. The monitor beeped steady but weak. I told her to rest, that I'd handle everything. She smiled the way you do when you don't believe the promise but want to. Back home, the air was still thick with that night's tension. The kitchen looked untouched, except for the mug on the counter, her mug, the one she'd used that morning. I lifted it and sniffed. Beneath the faint scent of tea, something metallic, faintly sweet. I sealed it in a Ziploc bag, then another, careful not to touch the rim. Old habits never die. Chain of custody, evidence, integrity, those things stay burned into your muscle memory. My contacts at the county lab hadn't changed much in 10 years. I called one Carl Jensen, forensic analyst. We'd built half a dozen convictions together back in the day. "Carl," I said, "I need a favor, quiet one." He hesitated for maybe half a second. "Is it personal?" "Yes." "Bring it tonight." I drove there in silence, headlights carving through the dark highway, the sound of Linda's faint breathing still echoing in my ears. At the lab's side entrance, Carl met me, white coat over street clothes, expression curious but respectful. I handed him the double-bagged mug. "Tell me if I'm imagining things," I said. He didn't ask questions. We both knew better. 3 hours later, his voice came over the line, subdued but heavy. "You weren't imagining it. Trace amounts of ethylene glycol confirmed. That stuff doesn't just fall in tea, Richard." I thanked him, hung up, and sat there in the driveway, the sound of the ocean faint in the distance. For the first time since retirement, my mind felt sharp again, cold, precise, clinical. He thought I'd gone soft. Let him. I still remembered how to build a case from the ground up, how to bury a man with nothing but the truth and a timeline. I watched the waves shimmer under the moonlight and exhaled slowly. The law never left me. It was just waiting to be called back into service. He thought my badge expired with my paycheck. I thought proof would bring peace. Instead, it brought silence. The toxicology report sat in my hand like a verdict no one wanted to read. Clear, factual, undeniable ethylene glycol. But the world doesn't run on facts anymore. It runs on narrative. And Brian understood that better than anyone. The first post appeared the next morning. A smiling photo of him and Jessica outside the hospital, arms around each other, captioned with just enough restraint to sound noble. "Family can be hard, especially when age changes those we love. Please pray for my father-in-law's peace of mind as he struggles through this." It took 12 hours for local news blogs to pick it up. "Ex-prosecutor's paranoia harms family," sources say. The headline read like a diagnosis. The comments were worse. "Classic control freak. Sounds like early dementia. Retirees lose perspective, poor guy." Then came the Reddit thread. Anonymous users dissected my career, my supposed temper, my imagined breakdown. They quoted neighbors, invented stories, built a caricature so complete it almost felt real. Even my old firm released a statement that was polite but lethal. "We wish Mr. Callahan well in his retirement and have no comment on his personal matters." Translation: he's on his own. The calls stopped. Friends I'd mentored, colleagues I'd vouched for, even people whose lives I'd once defended, they vanished into the same digital fog that now swallowed my name. And Linda still in the hospital, sedated, pale, couldn't speak a word in my defense. At home, the house felt different. The light seemed weaker, the walls closer. I walked from room to room like an unwelcome guest in my own life. On the mantel, Emily's photo caught the lamplight, the one of her missing front tooth, her crayon-smeared hands. I reached for it, but stopped halfway. For years, I'd told victims to stay strong under scrutiny, to remember who they were. Now, I couldn't even meet my daughter's eyes in a photograph. I turned it face down, unable to bear the reflection of what I'd become, the man everyone doubted, the father who couldn't protect his family. The quiet in the house wasn't peaceful anymore. It had weight. It pressed on my chest until even breathing felt like work. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Linda had drunk her last cup of tea, and listened to the refrigerator hum. The sound used to comfort me. Tonight, it sounded like a clock running out of time. My phone buzzed on the counter. I almost didn't look. Another message from someone telling me to take a break. No doubt. But then I saw the name. "Robert." The text was short. "You should see this." A link followed. No explanation. I clicked. The thumbnail froze on Brian's face, smirking mid-sentence, a ring light reflected in his eyes. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than defeat. Truth doesn't die, it just waits for a witness. Dusk had barely settled when I heard the knock. I almost didn't answer after weeks of silence and slander. Every sound at the door carried a sting. But then came Robert's voice. "It's me, Rich. Open up." He stood there in his old denim jacket, cap in hand, eyes uneasy. He looked like a man about to deliver either bad news or salvation. In his other hand, he held a small USB drive. "I didn't mean to spy," he began, voice low, "but I couldn't stand what they said about you." I gestured him inside. He followed me to the study, the air thick with the scent of stale coffee and fatigue. I plugged the USB into my laptop, the screen flickering to life. The footage began in grainy color, Robert's porch camera facing my driveway, headlights flaring, voices loud, the night Brian turned my home into a circus. But then, as the audio sharpened, a familiar voice cut through the noise. Jessica's. "Say hi to the internet from the love room," she laughed, panning her phone across the master bedroom. The camera caught her face, the photo of Emily, and then Brian's voice, mocking under his breath. The recording zoomed slightly, refocusing on the kitchen through a side window. Brian stood by the counter, pouring something from a small green bottle into a mug. He capped it quickly, pocketed the bottle, and looked around. Robert paused the video. "That's antifreeze, Rich. I use the same brand for my generator. He must have taken it from my garage the week he helped fix my sink." The room went silent except for the faint hum of the computer fan. My pulse slowed to something calm, deliberate. "Time-stamped?" I asked. Robert nodded. "Matches the night before Linda collapsed." I cross-referenced the footage with my lab report, the same window of time, the same chemical signature. 2 puzzle pieces finally locked. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I reached for my phone, scrolling through old contacts until I found the one I'd avoided for years. Margaret Hale, attorney and former colleague. Sharp, relentless, allergic to corruption. She answered on the second ring. "Richard Callahan," she said, half amused, half concerned. "You sound like a man about to make trouble." "Not trouble," I replied. "Justice." I told her everything. Linda's collapse, the poison, the smear campaign, the recording. She listened without interruption, then said simply, "Email me everything you have. We'll make this airtight." When the line went dead, I turned to Robert. His eyes were tired but certain. "Whatever you need, I'm in," he said. For the first time in weeks, the house felt lighter. Not healed, but alive. The law works only when someone's willing to testify. And now, I wasn't alone. When proof breathes, lies suffocate. The night Robert left, I opened the filing cabinet I'd kept locked since retirement. The click of the latch sounded different now, no longer habit, but purpose. Inside lay 40 years of order, discipline, and the faith that truth always had a paper trail. Tonight, that faith was going to war. I spread the files across my desk like a closing argument waiting to be delivered. On the left, Linda's insurance policies, updated the year before, her signature neat and sure. On the right, bank statements showing small withdrawals I hadn't noticed until now, each one linked to accounts Brian managed for family expenses. At the center, the policy amendment that made him a secondary beneficiary. The motive was right there, signed and notarized. Next came the timeline. Robert's time-stamped footage synced perfectly with Linda's hospital admission and Carl's toxicology report. The mug, the antifreeze, the live stream, all aligned like dominoes, leading to one inevitable conclusion. I saved each file to an encrypted drive, labeled and numbered, then cross-checked every link twice. Years of trial prep came back to me, the discipline of verification, the quiet rhythm of certainty building layer by layer. By dawn, I'd built what I used to demand from my best investigators. A case that could walk into a courtroom and speak for itself. At 8, I called Margaret. "Everything's ready," I said. She met me at her downtown office, still sharp in her 50s, eyes quick as ever. I handed her the drive, the lab report, and a printed summary of my findings. She skimmed the first page, then looked up. "Richard, this isn't circumstantial. It's prosecutable. He'll say it was stress, confusion, or bad coffee," I said. "He's already rehearsed it." She smiled, a cold, professional smile I remembered well. "Then we'll rehearse louder." "Oh." Together we walked the evidence into the district attorney's office. I hadn't been inside those walls in nearly a decade, but the smell of ink and burnt coffee hadn't changed. I left the package with the case officer, signed the chain of custody form, and turned toward the sunlight spilling through the glass doors. For the first time since Linda's collapse, I didn't feel hollow. I felt steady. That night, back home, I made myself a small meal, nothing fancy, just soup and bread. I sat at the table where the worst moments had unfolded and ate in silence, the house finally still. When I went to bed, I slept without dreaming. The next morning, the phone rang just after sunrise. "This is the district attorney's office," the voice said. "Mr. Callahan. We're moving forward. Attempted murder. Your evidence holds." I thanked her, set the phone down, and looked toward the ocean. The waves broke in slow, deliberate rhythm, each one erasing the last. Justice is patient, but never blind. It began the way lies always end quietly, then all at once. Margaret handled the release. One by one, the files we'd built, videos, screenshots, lab reports, were sent to the press and verified through independent forensic analysis. By noon, every local outlet had the story. By evening, it was national. "Retired Prosecutor Foyle's son in law's poison plot." The headline looked surreal on the screen, the same kind of headline I'd once approved for other people's justice. This time, it was my own. The footage ran in every segment. Jessica's laughing face, the mockery of the photo, Brian pocketing the green bottle. The timeline matched the toxicology results to the hour. No edits, no trick cuts. The truth didn't need them. Brian tried to spin it first. He went live, eyes wild, voice cracking. "It's fake. Deep faked. He's obsessed. My wife's family is being destroyed by a bitter old man." The comments section didn't believe him this time. "We saw the timestamps." He poured it himself. "You tried to kill her for money, you coward." On Facebook, the same relatives who'd once whispered behind my back wrote new posts. "We owe him an apology." Turns out he was right all along. Empathy has a way of boomeranging when truth finally lands. 2 days later, the courthouse steps looked different. The press that had once questioned my sanity now shoved microphones forward, eager for quotes. Margaret spoke for me, her voice crisp. "This is not vengeance, it's accountability." Inside the courtroom, Brian sat in a navy suit that couldn't hide the sweat on his collar. Jessica avoided my gaze completely. The prosecution presented the timeline I'd built, every timestamp, every transfer, every deposit he made after Linda's insurance update. When the verdict came, it didn't echo. It didn't need to. Guilty. Attempted murder. Life, with possibility of parole after 20. Brian's jaw tightened, his bravado dissolving into the air-conditioned silence. The bailiff approached with cuffs, the metallic click loud enough to slice through every rumor ever spoken about me. Linda was there, pale but steady, her arm in mine. She leaned close as they led him away and whispered, "You did what you had to." Outside, the world felt bigger again. Strangers nodded at me as we left the courthouse, construction workers, retirees, even a few people from church. It wasn't hero worship, it was recognition. A quiet acknowledgement that truth had won around in a world that often forgets what it looks like. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. Justice isn't loud, it's final. When we got home, the evening light cut across the living room, warm and soft. I looked at the photo of Emily on the mantel, still standing, still waiting, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel shame when I met her eyes. Forgiveness is a choice. Forgetting is extinction. And I intended to remember. I guess 99% of you will hear this, sigh, and scroll past, not clicking like or subscribe. Even if it only takes a second, what time is it for you, and where are you listening? The house was quiet again, but not empty. The kind of quiet that hums instead of echoes. It had been 6 months since the sentencing. The headlines had faded, the neighbors stopped whispering, and the reporters found new stories to chase. Time, like the tide, had rolled everything back to its natural rhythm. Linda spent her mornings in the garden, kneeling by the hydrangeas she once said were too much work. The color had come back to her face, and when she hummed along to the radio, it was the same soft tune she used to hum when Emily was little. I didn't realize how much I'd missed that sound until it returned. Inside, I'd repaired what could be fixed and replaced what couldn't. The marble floors gleamed again, no longer scarred by careless shoes or spilled beer. The study, once a war room, was back to being a place of thought. I closed the filing cabinet, locked it, and hung the key on its old brass hook. Some things deserve to rest. One morning, a letter came from the district attorney's office. I recognized the seal before I opened it. Case closed. It read, "Sentence affirmed. Restitution to be distributed upon asset liquidation." There was a small handwritten note at the bottom. "Thank you for reminding us why evidence still matters." I set the letter aside and poured 2 glasses of water, one for me, one for the woman in the photo. Emily's frame had been upright for months now, positioned so the morning light struck it just right. Today the sunlight caught the edge of the glass and flared into a bright, steady beam across the table. "You always said mercy was your weakness," I murmured, half smiling. Turns out it was just misplaced. Out back, Linda waved through the window, dirt on her gloves, a little streak on her cheek. I raised the glass in return. That evening I walked down to the water. The ocean looked the same as it always had, endless, calm, and indifferent to human noise. I stood there until the light dipped below the horizon, then raised a small crystal glass I'd brought from home. A toast not to victory, but to peace, to boundaries held, to kindness reclaimed, to the long, patient work of rebuilding what no court can restore. As the last trace of sunlight skimmed the surface, it glanced off Emily's photo once more, a single flash like a heartbeat before dusk. I took that as an answer. I had built this sanctuary with my hands, and now I had finally learned how to protect it with my mind. And it was, at long last, peaceful.